My name's Vicky from So Fabulous Fabrics. Today we're going to look at Seminole Patchwork. This is a style made from piecing colourful strips of fabric in horizontal bands. Now this video is going to show you 4 different styles of Seminole patchwork piecing, and I have made a cushion with mine, and here it is. So you can see I have used 3 different strips for the cushion. So I've got this one here, then the heart one, and this one on the end. And to make my cushion, I have just put other strips of fabric in between, and I've done some hand stitching for the quilting part of it. So that's the cushion that I have made. And I also had enough of the Seminole strips to make a small wall hanging. So for this one, I have used 4 different strips that I've made. So I'm going to show you how to do those strips today, and then you can decide what you want to make with them at the end. Thanks for watching. Let's go through the tools you're going to need today. So I've got my pressing mat just here. I've also got my tailor's clapper, which I will use with the iron if I want to press any seams. But I've also got my seam roller, which I use a lot because it's a bit quicker than doing it with the iron. So I have both. I've got some fabric scissors, some clips and my pins and my rotary cutter and my quilter's ruler. So that's what we're going to need today. So let's get some sewing done. These are the fabrics I'm using for this project. So I've got 4 pieces from Plentiful, which is Art Gallery fabrics. That's all the pattern ones. And then I'm going to use a small piece of the red, which is also from Art Gallery fabrics. I've gone ahead and cut all my strips that I'm going to need for this pattern. So we're doing 4 different Seminoles, and starting with number 1, I've got 2 sets of fabric cut and I've labelled them A and B. The same for number 2 and the same for number 3. And number 4, we have just got 1 set of fabrics. Here I have all of my strips stitched together. So I've got set 1A and 1B. Then I've got 2A and 2B, 3A and 3B. And then we've got just set number 4. So we're now ready to cut out the strips that we need from each of the sets. So if you follow the instructions on the pattern, it will tell you what widths you need to cut from each strip. So we're going to be cutting them vertically from each one, and then we will piece them together. I have all my sets of fabric cut into the strips. So we are going to start with 1A and 1B, which is the heart Seminole. So I'll just move the rest out of the way. And these are the 2 sets that we're going to need. I'm going to first of all sew 2 strips of each together. So there'll be 4 strips in total. And then we will have a look at that once I've sewn them, just so you can see how it's going to progress along the Seminole. So first of all, I'm going to take 1 of A and 1 of B. And how these are going to be stitched together is they're going to be stitched so this stitching line here is going to nest with this one here. So if you just turn them over, and if you've got your seams press the opposite way, then you can just nest them together and pop a pin in there just to keep them still while you go to the sewing machine. If they aren't nesting, then you could either just iron them the opposite way or just use your little seam roller to do that. So that's the only one that's going to need nesting on these two strips. I'm just going to pop another pin at the top here. And then those are ready to stitch together. Stitch them in sets of 2 and press the seams to one side or open, whichever way you want to do it. And then I'm going to join a second set on. There are my 2 sets to be joined together. So we are going to be joining this bottom seam here to this top seam here. So just turn them, or the top one, over, and my seams are pressed so I can join them together by just butting up the 2 seams. And then we're going to sew down here to that end just there. And then once I've sewn it, we'll come and just flatten it out and you can see how the hearts are looking. We have our first 2 pieces stitched together, and you can see that the hearts are now beginning to form. So I'm going to carry on and stitch all mine together, and it's just going to be one long strip. So once I have finished that, I'll get it all pressed first of all, and then we will look at how we're going to trim it. There we have the heart Seminole strip all pieced together. So we're now going to trim the edges off, so as we've got some straight edges here to be able to sew them together later on. I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the points. You're going to need to leave at least 1/4 inch to be able to sew them together. So I'm just going to flip mine this way, and then using my quilting ruler, I'm going to find the 1/2 inch point on my ruler and place that on the point of the heart just here. And what you need to do is just look up your piece of work and make sure that the line, the 1/2 inch line, if that's what you're cutting, or 1/4 inch line, is on that point or as close as. So obviously fabric does move when it's being stitched. So that's about right. And then I'm going to just trim the first part from the strip. And then carrying on, just move that bit up. And again, placing the ruler with the 1/2 inch line on that point or as close as. Right. I can see that they're not completely straight. So at this point, I'm going to at least trim the 1/2 inch, and then if it's not quite right later on, once I've got it all flat in front of me, I'm going to just manipulate it a little bit and just try and get these hearts so they all run in a straight line. So as long as I've got 1/2 inch at least seam allowance, then that's fine. We can sort it out later on. So just trim those bits off. And then I've just got this little last bit to do. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. I've finished straightening up my 2 edges, so they've now got a 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to straighten up these edges on each end. So when we come to stitch them together, or if we're putting borders on, we've got the ends are straight. Just do the other one. And there we have our Seminole strip with the hearts all finished. The next Seminole patchwork strip I'm going to make is the crosses. So you're going to need 2A and 2B. So we need 1 each of those. And this is how the first 2 will look stitched together. So you can just see here where the cross shape is starting to form. So I'm going to pop these together, and you can see that you're going to put the seam that is at the bottom of the yellow piece against the seam of the top yellow piece on the narrower width. So you're going to butt those 2 together, nest your seams. You might find that you will need to push your seam allowance over to the opposite side to be able to nest them. I've already done that with mine, and I just press them flat using my seam roller. I'm just going to pop a few pins in there. Sorry, not pins, clips. I was going to use pins, but at the time I couldn't find them. So we'll just clip it. It's just to keep it steady until you get it underneath the machine. So I'm going to stitch those 2 together, and then I'm going to attach it to this set. I might actually do another set as well, so we've got 3 sets stitched together, and then you can see how the crosses shape is going to form. I've stitched 3 sets together, so you can see them there, and if we just turn that to that way, you can then see where these crosses are forming. So I'm going to carry on with stitching together 2A and 2B. I'm going to stitch them in pairs all the way through, and then I will stitch each pair onto this strip. There is my second Seminole patchwork strip finished, and this one is the crosses. So you can see the crosses just here in the yellow with the little floral bits as the centre. So I'm now ready to trim this down, to trim all these edges off. And again, I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'll just move that up there a bit. And then using my patchwork ruler, I'm going to do a little bit at a time. So I'm going to put my 1/2 inch mark on these points here, and then I'm going to trim off one side and then turn it over and do exactly the same on the opposite side. And then we'll have a look at it finished. I've trimmed the edges from both sides, and I'm just going to trim both of the ends. So just place your ruler on the bottom edge and just cut that bit off. And do the same on the other end. Okay, so we're now ready to make our next Seminole patchwork strip. I'm calling this one square border. So you're going to need 3A and 3B, and we're going to be stitching them together. Just move those out of the way, like that. So you'll be butting up your seams just here and here. And then when you've stitched 2 sets of 2, this is how you're going to be putting them together. So you can see that this, I'll turn it that way, actually might be a bit easier. So this oblong here is stitched to the top of this square on the wider piece. And then when we've stitched them all together, we'll be moving it that way and again trimming the edges off. So I'm going to carry on and put my pieces together, and then I will stitch them all together to make my long strip. Here is my Seminole strip number 3. I have left a gap here for the seam allowance, so I have trimmed both of my sides, and I have also trimmed the 2 ends. So I've taken the triangle bits that are on the ends and just straightened them up. So that's number 3 finished. And my final set of Seminole patchwork is strip set 4. So you can see just here that I've stitched 2 sets together. So you will need 1, 2, and what we're going to do with the second one is we're just going to turn it the other way around, and then we're going to place it so you will have the 4 squares in the middle, which are going to form like a checkerboard. So I will be stitching all these again in pairs and then stitch the whole lot together in one row. And once we've done that, we will trim it again as we have done before, and then we're ready to use our Seminole patchwork strips to make something beautiful. Seminole strip number 4 is completed, and I have trimmed again each of the sides. Now for this one, because it was quite a short piece, when I cut the triangle piece off this end, I decided to attach it to this end. So if I just flip that over, you can see that I have stitched it on just there. You can see where the little bit flips out just on the end there. And then that has given me another almost complete checker piece in the middle here. This will just mean, depending on what I'm going to make with it, I have got a little bit more of the design that I can sew into my piece of work. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You could cut your triangles off like we have done with the other strips, but for this one it will make quite a short strip. So that's why I've attached that on the end. Once you have all of your Seminole strips completed, you're then ready to decide what you are actually going to do with them. I'm going to make a cushion cover with some of mine. So this is the cushion that I'm going to be using. So I've got this rectangular cushion, and I'm going to make a cushion cover with these for the front, and then I'm going to find a different fabric to use on the back, and I'm going to make an envelope back. And then I think what I might do with the rest of the strips is I might just put them together to make a very small wall hanging to hang on the wall. So that's what I'm going to do with mine, and I'd love to see what you do with your Seminole strips.